Go with a home team.
All right, best crawfish in the state of Mississippi at Mudbugs, 2 locations in Rankin County. Their shrimp is amazing. Coors Light and crawfish, that's a winning combo. All at Mudbugs, 2 locations in Rankin County. And delicious crawfish, shrimp, among other. Their nachos are amazing, too. Highly recommend those with a cold Coors Light. The weather this weekend is perfect for crawfish. Gets up over 60, 65 degrees. Get you some crawfish. Enjoy some college baseball. All right, we're live in the Bank Plus studio. Out of Bounds show. I'm your host, Bo Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. You can watch the show on YouTube, search Out of Bounds Sports, or you can watch it on Facebook, search the Out of Bounds show. We welcome in our friend Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joins us on the Miller Lite guest line, and we've been talking about how Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson are doing something that's a little bit different today, in that they're demanding some kind of say in some personnel decisions. You saw Brady do a little bit of it and so on. I think people think that Aaron Rodgers has been frustrated over the years at Green Bay. And, Mike, I'd like to get your thoughts where this could be trending as far as quarterbacks asking to have at least a little bit of say in maybe their offensive coordinator and a couple of personnel moves around them.
Well, it's not like you reinventing the wheel. I mean, I think that's always been kind of a part of the position. You may have done it differently in years past, where you and the head coach or you and the owner have that discussion. I think in today's world of social media and sort of putting that platform out, they're getting kind of the audience to back them up on this. And so it's not something new as far as NFL's concerned. I've always felt, and just from being around guys that have played that position, that they have had those conversations. If it's with the owner, the general manager, the head coach, but it was done differently. Now, okay, if you're not going to listen real well, I'll take it to the streets, so to speak, and I'll put it on my media platforms and see what happens. And that becomes a lot of pressure then all of a sudden. So it's not something new, but how they are able to translate that is new.
That's true.
And so I do think we're living in an age, too, where I think owners and general managers of teams are another generation, younger people. They've earned their money or made their money a different way if you're an owner, much differently than in years past where it's years of accumulation. A lot of times, it's in the tech world. It's Silicon Valley. It's Tesla, Amazon, you name it. They've made their money quickly. So don't give me this stuff about wanting to build over a course of time. I want it now. And it's difficult to tell that owner who's made his money quickly he can't do it that way in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball. It's difficult to give them that explanation. So as the quarterback, you're in a position where you hold a lot of the cards, and that's why I think you're seeing this sort of shuffle all across the NFL today, and you'll see even more that just lack of patience. And I'm going to move on. If I don't win, I'm moving on. And if you have an opportunity to pick up a star quarterback that can keep me relevant, that's nothing against the maybe guy. Man, because Bo, I hear it on talk show radio. I hear it from social media. Just because you're after a star quarterback, that's not demeaning to the next guy that you might have went after if you don't get the star quarterback. Come on. In this world, that's some reality check of a maybe person over the star guy. And that's why I think there's so much interest in Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson at this stage. Those are star players.
Do you think Seattle will
NFL.
figure it out, Mike? Do you think I'm sorry, do you think Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll will get on the same page and that
No.
Russell No?
I don't. I don't see that happening.
I think Pete thinks that he can do it without Russ. I don't think he can. I don't think you can do it I think Pete thinks he drove. I mean, look, Pete's a good coach, and he's got a good culture, and no doubt he drove the team, but you have to have a playmaker at that position. And as a defensive-minded guy, I don't know if Pete really, really believes that you have to have that level of player to go all the way. You agree or disagree, Mike?
I think Pete knows the importance of the quarterback position, but I think there's always a relationship that frays, and I think this one has, between him and Russell. And it's almost every year that there's been some little incident occur. And I think Pete's wanting to move on. Pete understood that when he first took over at Southern Cal, he was maybe the sixth or seventh choice for that job. I remember Coach O telling me the story because O was there. He was there with Paul Hackett. Everybody got released but him. He was the only survivor. So, like he said, every day there was a new name in the LA Times or talk shows about the guy taking over, and then it became Pete. But basically, Pete was the sixth or seventh choice of the people in power at USC at that time. But they needed a catalyst, and he understood that. And then he went through an array of quarterbacks that very few teams were able to go through. From Carson Palmer to Matt Leinart, Matt Castle. You think about Booty was there also, Mark Sanchez. All in a course of about 7 years at the college level. Come on, he ain't winning those games without those guys. But I do think he understands the quarterback position is what it is, but I think this has become personal between the two individuals. Pete's philosophy has always been he wants to run the ball. He wants to control the clock, being able to run the football, and then that opens up the play-action game. And all that's true, but that can work at the collegiate level at that time. But today, that's not working anywhere. And one, your offensive line stinks in Seattle. It's not good. They've tried different running backs, and it hasn't worked since Marshawn Lynch. So, okay, you can have a philosophy. But if it doesn't work and you don't have the right people, what good is the philosophy? And so I think this has become personal now between the two parties here.
So you think
I think it's become that way, and the divorce is going to happen. If it's this year or next, it's going to happen between these two parties. Because it's not going to change. What makes you think that things are going to change in Seattle? They've traded their first-round picks off for Jamal Adams. They've 3 high picks. And listen, I'm a big fan of Jamal. I think he's a hell of a player. But he is who he is as a player. He's much more of a dominant guy, closer to the line of scrimmage than a coverage guy. He's like a small linebacker who plays up front, can blitz, plays the run that sort of thing. But you gave up 3 early picks and 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams. So where's your help going to come from offensive line-wise and that running back? Where's that going to be? You're up against the cap financially. You got some maneuvering to do. And is Pete the genius when it comes down to the draft? Name me a guy other than DK over the last 4 years that he's picked up in the draft.
Yeah, and he got DK with the last pick of the second round. That's a great point. Mike Detillier on the Miller Lite guest line. So for our listeners, Mike doesn't think that Russell will be in Seattle for the long haul. Maybe this year, but eventually they'll get a divorce and move on, which will be fascinating to see where he lands and what Seattle does next, because Pete Carroll can't win with a Matt Flynn type QB. He may think he can, but he can't. So not that would be the guy, but I'm just throwing that out, who Pete signed right before they drafted Russell. All right. Do you also Paul Allen passed away, and Paul did have the owner of the Seahawks, he did have his finger on kind of what was going on, and his sister has inherited the team. She didn't care anything about it, and there's discussion that Pete makes all the calls now, even over and above John Snyder. Have you heard that, and do you agree with that, Mike?
I think Pete and Paul Snyder and John Snyder work as a tandem.
Okay.
I really think they do. Now, I think Pete has final say, but I think they sort of work as a tandem. John, I think, has always billed himself as this personnel guru. And at one time, I think really was. He hit on a lot of picks, and then it soured on him. So, not knowing the inner workings of what goes on there, and I suspect both of them sort of screwed up picks. That the part that's missing here is Pete Carroll, the part-time general manager, is messing up Pete Carroll, the head coach.
Yes.
I think very, very much like we saw what happened in Houston with a head coach that I think was a pretty decent head coach, but he was a terrible GM. He got way too much power involved here. And so, in ownership, who knows what the hell's going on there. But I think that there comes a point, very few guys can do it. Listen, as much as I think, and I'm a true believer in this, that in our lifetime, Bill Belichick is the greatest head coach ever, and the record proves it. But his work as a GM in making draft choices has been lousy the last few years. Now, almost as though he's overthought every pick and it hasn't worked out for the most part. Again, name me a big-time player over the last 4 years that he's selected via the draft.
Other than DK?
No, I'm talking about
Belichick.
Bill Belichick.
No. I mean, this – and evidently he tells everybody starting in late – you already know this, Mike. In late January, I've got the draft from here, and it just doesn't work out for him, Mike.
No, you've got to have somebody in your ear that has watched these guys and watched them play. Rick Venturi, who's a good friend of mine, who coached with the Saints for a long period of time and was and is a close friend of Belichick. He coached with him in Cleveland. Bill tried to get him sort of out of retirement to go coach with the Patriots. And he's made me this comment more than one time that Bill, when it comes down to a veteran player, is much, much better in an evaluation than he is with a college guy. And that he tries to sort of what I call loop a player. Okay, I had a Mark Bavaro with the Giants as an assistant. I want Mark Bavaro. Find me the next Mark Bavaro in the college ranks. I had Carl Banks, with the Giants, find me a linebacker like Carl Banks. And so he sort of loops. I'm looking for that next guy that's just like him. And sometimes you find out when you sort of pigeonhole yourself like that, you're going to make mistake after mistake after mistake. So
It's a good point.
I think what Rick is saying is that, hey, he needs someone that he can trust, not just a yes man around him that says, "Oh yeah, coach, you right about that." And he's had those type players and those type people around him that he needs somebody to say, "Coach, that guy's not Bavaro. That guy's not Leonard Marshall. That guy is not a Curtis Martin." Okay, this is who I think would fit very well with us. And yes, he picked Gronk, and yes, he was able to get Brady, but boy, he's had a lot of whiffs the last few years, and that's a tough evaluation because also you're looking at an environment in today's world where he is really tough on a player. He puts a lot of pressure on a player to mentally understand what you have to do in every situation, and physically tough. You've seen NFL films with the deal of, hey guys, if you can't take criticism, then I don't want you here. And he's riding these players pretty good. And some guys don't respond to any of that though anymore. You're not living in your grandpa's world or your dad's world of coaching. It's a lot more understanding the player and what motivates them. And sometimes jumping them is the worst thing for them. Because I work with former players that tell me if you told somebody even 20 years ago or 25 years ago, jump them, they would get in a shell and wouldn't play well. You had to understand how to handle them. And it's like that in the workplace environment, right? That we all work in. There are some people you can jump on and maybe kind of hard sell them on something, and they get it, okay? And it doesn't affect them. You tell somebody one little thing they do negative, and it's like you stole money from them when they were like 6 years old. And so, so you understand that there's some sensitive in the Tookus world that we live in. That's what makes what Nick Saban does at Alabama remarkable. Okay? I'm not saying he doesn't care about your feelings, but if he's going to tell you something, he's going to tell you, and you just got to accept it. And he's trying to make you better. But not everybody's like that. And I do think we're living in that reality world of professional sports today. You may not like it. You may scream and holler about it. But guess what? You better live in it because that's what you're going to see for the rest of your life, where there are going to be some dominant personalities like a Brady and a LeBron James who sort of takes over an organization and with personnel decisions. And you've got head coaches that maybe in their 40s or early 50s understood, but as they get older and they stay in the business, man, listen, I'm hard-headed. I'm going to do what I want. You do what you want and you get beat.
Right.
Okay?
Well, there's a lot of blame. The Athletic had a great article on Russell Wilson and Carroll and put the blame on both men, which I thought was good.
But
it laid out.
I think this. I do believe this about most star athletes. If they feel their head coach got their back, they're not turning on them. Okay? Because it worked for a long time in New England with Brady and Belichick. It worked because I think both guys felt, I got your back, you got mine. But there came a point And I think you can trace this back to the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, where I think that's where the straw broke the camel's back.
Okay.
You think about two strong personalities, Drew Brees, Sean Payton.
Yeah, tell me how much they tied up. Like how much
They didn't tie up much of anything.
Okay.
Because I think Sean always had Drew's back.
Okay.
And I think Drew knew that. And he always had Sean's back. Even when this team was going through 7-9, 8-8 season. Okay, did you ever hear Drew kind of go off on Sean? Never.
No.
Even when he knew he was playing on some lousy defenses, never said a word. It worked because I think both guys felt as though they had each other's back in this. But I think even with all the success, at the end it came down to hard feelings between Belichick and Brady.
Okay.
It came down to that. And now it's the same thing in Seattle.
And Houston. Okay.
And it happens in Houston. So it happened in L.A. Okay, Goff leads you to the Super Bowl with McVay, and then things start to unravel a little bit. Was it all Goff's fault? No.
Right.
Was it all McVay's fault? No.
Right.
But I think the egos got involved, and Sean was, man, I ain't going down in the Titanic with you. Off you go, and I'm bringing in Stafford.
Well, what about Dak? I've only got a minute, unfortunately. We're not going to be able to really do this. It won't be Dak and his head coach, but Dak may be finally, even though he's evidently got a great relationship with Jerry and Stephen Jones, he may be getting to the point, if they don't get something done in the next 7 to 8 days, where he gets pretty ticked off. Mike, I've only got a minute. Your thoughts?
Well, I think with that, it has nothing to do with money or I got your back. I think it all has to do with the length of the contract, where I think Dak wants a shorter deal, feeling as though that I can hit the jackpot again. And that may be agent-driven, okay, which we all know happens in this world. And then Jerry puts the line of, nope, it's got to be my way. It's got to be this length of time. And Dak's people feel, let's do it shorter. Let's do the shorter deal. So I think that's the rift. It's different than, say, certainly Deshaun and Pete and what's happening with Pete and Russell. It's different because it all comes down to the length of the contract. But then hard feelings get involved, too. You don't want to move, and I don't want to move.
Right. All right. Mike Detillier, NFL Insider, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you both.
Man, he's awesome. At Mike Detillier on Twitter. He joined us on the Miller Lite guest line. The show is brought to you by Capital Preservation Services. Todd Martis and their team will take care of you and your business. Earn more and keep more with Capital Preservation Services. Earn more and keep more with Capital Preservation Services. Todd Martis and the team at Capital Preservation Services will help you earn more and keep more. Hour number 3.